Hey, everybody, welcome back to Listen for Real. I'm Jen Oliver here with Jacia Cornwise, and this is a different topic altogether, my friends. I met Jacia a number of months ago because we were on a media gig together, and immediately I learned about trauma and I learned about the movement of our bodies and how trauma can get trapped in our bodies, but also can be moved beautifully through movement, through dance, through emoting, and that was new information. And this should tell you something about how it's going to be on the couch today as we get comfy and cozy together and have this really deep conversation with Jacia. She was so open about that and transparent about her own experience and what she's learned and how she manages many, many difficult things. In the first 2 days I met her, and I just went, "Oh, this is someone I must know, I must be friends with," because as you all know, I want to have conversations that are not superficial, that go deep, that sharpen all of us, that we grow from, and sometimes that means we talk about really difficult things. And with that, I want to give a bit of a trigger warning if areas of, sexual assault, um uh, um, I want to be so careful with this. Sexual assault or a crime against a woman are in any way triggering for you. I ask you to hold yourself gently and with grace and perhaps pass on this episode or listen to it with great care because it's actually so solution oriented that you might feel complete liberation by what you hear here. I could see Jacia's like, Jacia, expand on that right away. Let's just get right in. Because it's like the answers are actually going to be here in this podcast.
Well, and
But I
I'm not
want
just
you to know what we're talking about, especially if you have kids around. You might just choose to listen to it when your kids aren't there. But Jacia, you want to just expand on that a little bit as
I
we
was just
go
gonna
in?
say,
So
I'm
important.
definitely not coming in here in a victim stance, although I have been, a victim of many things. I am a survivor, and I'm a master coach and counselor and movement and breath facilitator for 30 years. And so I'm coming here to tell you you can get through all
Yeah.
sorts of things, big or small.
Yeah. And yeah, and that's why I don't want you to just, pause and not listen right now. If there is still liberation and freedom you need because perhaps you have been victimized in some way, um, there may be something here that was right on time that I believe you were meant to hear. I believe that so firmly. I think we're resourced right when we need it. And that is my hope and prayer for you all as you join us on the couch because Jossie has been that for me. I've had my own traumas I've needed to move and am moving with her guidance, her help, her coaching as we speak. So she knows of what she teaches, and I can honestly attest to the value I've already gained in just a few short months of knowing her. And that's why I wanted her here to speak on the podcast because remember, my premise is always about what is the work we need to be doing to getting back to real, closer to real, to who we are, to shed our voices that aren't, to really speak with our authentic truth, and to also get out of our echo chambers. Our echo chambers can keep us stuck. And so often, many of us talk to the same people who reinforce our beliefs, even when they're limited in narratives and limited mindsets or victim mindsets. How many times do we perhaps take in media or listen to news that completely reinforces our echo chamber? So, this podcast is always about being the antidote to that and opening up our perspectives and new paradigms. And that is exactly what Jossie has done for me and why I wanted you all to meet her and know her beautifully. So with that, let's jump in as though we're cozied up on the couch because your work has been born of some unbelievable things over the course of your life and many decades. And Jasia, would you just give them a little bit of your story as we get started? I just want them to know you. What do you want them to know about you and your story and your work? And let's start there because then I want to just unpack and delve into all the things you and I seem to always get really juicy and into.
Sure.
Yeah.
my story. I never know where to start because there's so many stories in a lifetime. And I've definitely been one of those people who've had more tough stuff than some, and enough that most people wouldn't even think of surviving. And I really have found ways to not just survive, but thrive and teach and bring joy and resilience. And that's why I'm on the podcast. But that being said, let's see. So I was born blind in my left eye. So all of us have some like experience in life where we feel different. Mine started at the very beginning. And so I had that kind of feeling outside of it, being told there's something wrong with you. Let me tell you, elementary and middle school are not super easy. So those kind of experiences, whether you had that for whatever reason you were bullied for or picked on for, didn't feel like you fit in or weren't good enough, it's nothing new, but it was from the beginning that was there. So I think that gave me a certain way I stepped back. And then I'll list just a few big ones, just so people get like I've worked with a lot of different traumas. There's those personal trauma, just a personal experience. My brother was killed by a drunk driver. He was my best friend and only sibling when I was 19, and he was nearly 17. That shattered my whole family, my world perspective, and set me on a journey of seeking. How do we why? What's going on this planet? It's not what I thought. My life wasn't going to look the way I thought it was going to look. Religion wasn't going to help me the way I thought religion was going to help me. My family wasn't able to help me. That no one was able to help me. I had to go on my own journey. So that started a big journey, which shifted my goals. It gave me my goals. Actually, I didn't know what I wanted to do. I was on some trajectory to become a writing teacher, which actually paid off because I always knew I was going to write, and I did recently write in public. Published a 3-time award-winning book.
Yes.
But so it came back around in a circle, but I moved quickly into a path on studying psychology. Moved out to the Bay Area, went to CIIS, got my master's in counseling psychology, and then went and got shadow coaching certified with Debbie Ford and breathwork and 5 rhythms and dance and somatic experiencing. A lot of different things open over here on the West Coast.
Yeah.
But when I was 26, nearly 20, 26 and a half, actually, it was on my half birthday, I was um, a victim of a very horrific crime. I was taken hostage, kidnapped by more than one person at gunpoint, um, raped, robbed, and went through a horrific long night that I did not believe I was going to make it through, and miraculously did. And that journey took me into really having to face trauma, understand PTSD, understand the kind of splits that happen in order to survive that we do when we have experiences that are too much to manage.
Yeah.
And some people have those kind of experiences early and you just have complete blackouts because if you actually remembered the things, you would have gone psychotic. And then some of us have more capacity. I had a lot of capacity to be present because I'd already been working with meditation and working in extreme skills and on a path since I was 19, doing my own therapy and coaching and seeking for spiritual solutions and, all those things. And so I had more to hold me. But, I had my own really wild openings from that experience as well. And then,
Yeah.
I've gone through divorce. That's another trauma so many of us have,
Yeah.
sadly, in our world, and also naturally in our world. It's part of the experience of sometimes finding out who you are and getting to choose you rather than that ancestral information.
Yeah.
And then most recently, I would not say this was a trauma, but it could have been. I and this is I did a TEDx talk, and this came out of about a few months. So yeah, really about 6 months before that, I was invited to I got a phone call where I had to speak, or I didn't have to, I chose to speak at the parole trial of one of the men who was still in jail 26 years later for what had happened. And I chose to go. What I found out there, um, which was I used all my tools. At that point in my life, I had already had a successful coaching career, counseling career for a couple of decades. I have a healing center. I've been teaching classes. I felt pretty together. I was dancing every day for decades, breathing, all these wonderful tools that I've developed. So I was really surprised when I went to that experience how much started coming through my body. I did not expect it. It was like all these things that I thought I'd processed years ago, shaking and trembling and power centers opening and closing. And I found myself needing to dance and shake and move and ground and breathe. I danced through that trial and 4 hours of that. And it's what got me through. And when I finished that, it's like I was able to speak. I was able to speak my truth to him and to the jury and to myself, the whole thing. And it was so powerful. And I felt like a strike of lightning. I don't even know how to explain it. My entire body recharged. And when I came out of that, I suddenly had a whole new task list of what I knew I needed to do, which was to step up and speak to the world about the power of breath and movement as essential tools for why I was able to stay joyous all these years. How did I get through all of this, what I went through, even on top of therapy and coaching and all those things, the importance of dance, movement, breath, and sound releasing.
Oh, I'm serious. Y'all, this is what I'm realizing. You've heard me talk about it before, but Jacia, when she said that just now, I got shivers because we try to muscle through everything and think through everything to do our personal work. And there is something to be said for therapy and so many different
That's it.
therapeutic modalities. I'm thumbs up, agreed. Jacia is too. But I, all these years, have had so much stuff to process. And because I never engaged my body in the processing, I was just always trying to muscle it with my mind and negotiate it and rationalize it or make sense of it. You guys, sometimes you cannot make sense of certain things in the human experience. We can't make sense of them. And if we're relying on our minds and our thought processes and our beliefs to heal and make sense of things, we never can fully get there. And so that's what I learned, Jacia, with you is the way you used your body. Will you explain what you mean though? Like, could you give an example? Let's use the parole trial for parole, for example. What were you feeling in your body when you're going, whoa, this stuff's
Well,
coming up? Like, can you describe it for us to understand it? And then when you say you moved and
so
danced, like, how
what
would that look?
what I mean and what's really important about that is I know that if I'm getting triggered, I'm having a bunch of feelings or energy moving and I'm trying to stay focused and suddenly I don't feel focused anymore. The job is not to try and get focused again with my brain. The job is to go, where am I being triggered? And so it's about letting the body be your inner guidance system. So if I felt like I just wanted to shake and push and scream and move my belly and swirl around the room and stomp, and I'm calling that dancing. So I'm not saying I was like salsa dancing or samba dancing or on the thing, like doing the, I wasn't doing that. I wasn't trying to check out. I was trying to use the feelings in my body and let my body release it because my mind can't release what was in my yoni or in my chest or the rage in my hands or the shaking in my thighs. I had no idea the sweat running down my back. I needed to just like move with it and move with it and breathe with it and release it. So I was giving permission for what was still stuck cellularly, held for decades, to just finalize it and come through.
Wait, will you talk because you also have a psychology background, and with all of the work you do, this is what makes you so good. It's not just your lived experience, but you understand how stuff gets trapped in our bodies cellularly, as you said. Can you just explain that for the novice like
Well, it's
me
really
and everyone else
That's
who
really
might not get
fascinating
that?
because
Because I think
even,
that's
modern
interesting.
psychology and traditional psychology doesn't necessarily bring you there. It's only more recently, in the past decade, like some of you might have heard of Dr. Bessel van der Kolk, who wrote The Body Keeps the Score. So he's gotten really known for talking,
Mhm.
fantastic book, for talking about the reality that our bodies are what hold the memories and we hold them inside. So things that we can't I was saying this earlier, things that we can't deal with our minds, they get stored in the body. And and sometimes, it can be a small trauma or a big one. It doesn't have to be the kind of stuff I'm talking about. Just your dad yelling at you, or someone someone saying something mean about how you look or how you talk or your capacity. That's trauma. We don't have to have this extreme stuff I'm talking about. I work with people
Yeah.
with just the smallest things because what happens is not only does it form beliefs in our mind, but we actually close out parts of our body. I mean, when I work with people moving on the dance floor, they become different movers. They had no idea things were locked down inside their bodies. Parts of their bodies open up. Um, we've learned that it by moving it opens new neural pathways to freedom, more compassion and joy by moving it out. We don't even necessarily have to remember all the details. It's moving the energy that's stuck deep down. We also carry generational trauma in our bodies. So sometimes we're not only carrying issues we carried, we're carrying the
Yep.
issues our mom and our dad and our grandparents carried, because it's even been shown there's genetic markers now proving like why certain people have dispositions for certain mental disorders, anxiety issues,
Yes.
body problems. Those are literally passed down. And often, if you went to the underside of this, I'm pretty guaranteeing we are going to find undealt with trauma, not necessarily because people didn't want to deal with it, because they didn't know how.
Mhm. Well, and they weren't necessarily in an environment where it was even discussed or something you would address. It was
Yeah.
just, well, this is the status quo and this is life. You just reminded me too, this idea of stuff being trapped in our bodies as opposed to memories we just hold in our head. It's so beyond that. The head is only a small portion. It's not like memories are in the gray matter of our brain. They're literally
I just,
stored
this
in
may be a little
parts of our
graphic, but when I was
bodies.
in the heart of the trauma, when I was being violated,
Yeah.
my body, my mind, I mean, I had spirit like come and like my mind had to pop open. I had this real experience where I knew I was forced to drive at gunpoint. Long story, but my mind had to leave all the thoughts and the fears. And I suddenly was like, I would call it in the spirit mind and the mind of the universe. There was something there holding me and it had to empty. And then during the actual, like
Yeah.
some of the intense moments where it wasn't once, but many times I was violated, I was told to lift up out of my body, out of my chakras and get out of there so that the violation was not going to connect to my feeling body in the same way. So essentially, I was disassociating. We can call that from a psychological point, but because I was aware of it and I was being filled with all sorts of energy, I was really aware that I had to disconnect from parts of my body, and I've spent the rest of my life trying to get back in that, from that.
Wow. Wait, okay. That is so profound. I can't even A, I can't even believe the divinity and the gift of you being so supported and loved in something so painful and horrific that to your point, like you
No,
said, you didn't know you
I
were even
mean,
going to survive
and
that
it was
night.
such a also shift to see how the
Okay.
mind. You talked about the monkey mind and getting out of I had a really dark side of my mind
Yeah.
saying all sorts of fear because you better believe I have ancestors in fear based on this exact
Yeah.
thing happening and all sorts of stories. So I had one part of me being like, you're going to be the girl thrown
Yeah.
into the woods on the ABC special. And another part going, yeah, that's actually going to happen. Not only if you keep thinking that way, but if you don't find a way to energetically, this is a whole other piece, connect with this one of the people there who had some.
I was going to ask you about that. Would
Well,
you
that's what I'm
mind
saying.
talking
You
about
guys
that?
got to
Because
check
that,
out
when
my
I
book. The
read your
story is
book,
really
when you
powerful.
it's so powerful that you even were resourced in that moment to connect to one of the perpetrators to his humanity.
It
And that
absolutely did.
probably
And
kept you
actually, I mean,
alive that night, not
yeah,
going
it
to
absolutely
one
did. I
place,
mean,
but going to another.
I think it's described best if you read my book, which is called The Love Ball Game, Embracing Yourself and
Yeah.
Embodying Your Soul. But essentially, I mean, this is going to sound really weird to some of you, but I was receiving messages that were not coming from anything I could have known at one level, but at another level, I'm very, very intuitive. I've had to develop that as a healer, as someone who's gone through things. I have a lot of insight. In fact,
Yeah.
I was born blind in my left eye, and some people in different cultures will say if you're blind in your left eye, you're taken out of the tribe and marked as a shaman. Well, if I had known that when I was young, that would have felt so cool. But I didn't figure that out later. Yeah.
Oh my gosh, that's beautiful. Because you are, that's my experience of you. You're a healer, you're a shaman, you are a teacher, you are a guide. Oh, that
Yeah.
makes
Well,
all the
it's
sense
funny
in the
though,
world to me.
it's true, but with trauma, you can that guidance can get misguided because you get so opened up. And so that's part of it is trauma does a few things to people. Some people, let's talk about trauma and how you know if you have it. Some of you might not think you have any trauma, but you're very controlled. Like
Yeah.
things have to be perfect. You have to have everything super clean. You're very like type A, and you really freak out if things aren't going in the lineup. Some of that is trauma. Now it might be past generational trauma, but there is trauma underneath anything that's rigid. And just like it, the other extent of where people go in trauma and where I think I was more, my tendency was to get so expanded into the universal consciousness that sometimes my boundaries would dissolve and I had to figure my boundaries out again. So there's different ways that trauma affects people. And then some people's minds just
Oof.
absolutely split apart. And believe me, I had verges of those edges quite a few times from having to heal from this.
Well, and I want to add to this. Y'all, if any of you listened in season 1 to my episode with Dr. Valerie Rain, she talked about the concept of epigenetics and how trauma does leave markers on our DNA, as Jacia referenced earlier. And I found the most compelling part of that was when she gave an actual story of how this works. Because I think to all of us who are new to this type of thinking and awareness, this is seeming like, wait, what? Generational trauma? How is your DNA marked? Let me explain. So, in her example, she talked about a study where they took mice and they put them in boxes. They put an electric current under that box to send a mild shock to startle the mice. And while they would do that, they would flood that box with the smell of cherry blossoms. They'd shock them. They'd receive there'd be a traumatic response, flood of cherry blossoms at the same exact time. They then bred identical mice through the controlled way you would do a study. They bred these mice, and in their children and grandchildren, they put them in boxes and simply flooded the box with cherry blossoms, no electrical current. And with the smell of the cherry blossoms, there was a traumatic response in the children and grandchildren of these mice. And this is not like folklore that was passed down from like old Grandpa
Right.
Mouse who says, beware the bad cherry blossoms. This is something that was imprinted on their DNA, then passed down to the children and grandchildren. So if that is happening there in that example, scientifically shown, then now I hope that makes more sense to go, okay, so in your family history, let's say the women were repeatedly molested or repeatedly um, berated, or let's say your family has survived the Holocaust or enslavement. Those things mark our our DNA, and then we may have responses that we go, I've never had any such thing, but we have an unreasonable response in our mind to a trigger. I want to explain that because I think it's really important because we also beat the hell out of ourselves thinking something's wrong with us when we have a triggered response and we can't make sense of it. And then again, we go into our mind and we try to make sense of it. And when we have no clear evidence of something happening to
Right.
us, then we just go, well, I must be crazy. But what you do is go, no, it's still very much in your body and
Yeah,
let's
let's
move
learn
it.
how to
Let's do
befriend our
something
body,
with
how
it,
to
right? I
listen
mean,
for the
can
answers
you
there, how to open and close and shake and move and dance and wiggle and release and cry and move the stuff. The old saying, move the issues out of your tissues. Literally, we need to move that stuff out. And we need to move it out. I mean, there's like, believe me, I mean, as a
yeah.
five rhythms teacher, as someone who has led many group dances and retreats, etc., it's amazing to dance in big groups. But there's also something very powerful, and this is one of the things I bring to the programs I'm leading right now, is what it means to be in a container where you don't feel the pressure of anyone seeing you and you actually learn how to release that with yourself. Because I want to empower people to actually be so at home in themselves and learn how to create such safe space for themselves that they can daily move through the stuff they need so they can be free for their days and not necessarily be limited by an audience of any sort.
Well, you taught me this because I've been working on this with you. And in one of your courses, you talked about, yes, moving, but there was one where you said, "I- I- if you need to yell, if you need to growl, if you need to scream, if you need to sing, you were like, do it. Because maybe that's one way it needs to move out of you or be expressed through you. And I remember last week I was having some really difficult stuff I was facing, and I was driving in my car and I was yelling, I was cursing, and I just thought, no, this is productive. I am giving myself what I need right now. I mean, it's like you gave me, Jacia, you kind of gave me permission to not feel crazy or weird, but to go, oh no, this is actually essential. I'm a soul inside a human body, and we were given human bodies to move, to express, otherwise I'd be, a soul in I don't know, something else. So if that's true, then it makes perfect sense that to the degree I can to have an emotion, to scream, to yell, to sing, to move, to dance, to wiggle, that made sense to me. And it helps because I do feel like things that are trapped in me are moving, you know? Did I ever tell you, Jasia, and then I want to go to a quick break for a second, but did I ever tell you about the time when I was going through my really depressive state? I've talked about it here in previous episodes, and I got that massage and she moved and I didn't know. I had a lot of grief I felt was trapped in my body. I came to someone I trust deeply who is both my massage therapist, but she's also a very powerful intuitive healer of her own. I said, I feel like I have so much grief I have absorbed over my entire life that I've just absorbed it like a sponge, absorbed it. And I'm now saturated to overflowing and I got no room left. And I've got to have like some kind of grief ritual or move some of this grief out of me. And I can't even put my hands on it. Right. And she just intuitively said, okay, come on in. And she set me up to give me just a normal massage, but she sang over me. She drummed at moments. She'd do a sound bowl. She'd work on me. And there was no speaking. But amazingly, during that experience, I will never forget that I had the images of names or people who had, for me, it was sexual energy or trauma or experience. It was to be graphic. I was like, I was a warm place for a man to put his sadness. I was a a a vessel and a receptacle for a man to thrust anger. I mean, you guys, that's real. I'm sorry to be that graphic, but maybe that's going to set someone else free
Don't
because it
be
has set
sorry.
me
Yeah.
free
So
because I was just on the receiving end. Yeah, and I'm just holding it all, and we are not meant to hold all of that. We are not meant to. And it was like as she worked on me that day on the massage table, as she drummed, as she sang, all of the sudden I didn't even go in there thinking about this component. Images from childhood, high school, college, all the way through my life, people I didn't even ever have an experience with, but it's like I intuitively knew they held a certain energy towards me that I picked up on subconsciously and absorbed. Is that amazing? And it's like they came to my mind and they left me. It was like a release and a goodbye. There was no pain, there was no suffering. It was just one by one people I'd never thought of in 30 years. Is that amazing? That to me
100%.
is
It's
proof
such a
of what
beautiful
our bodies
story.
hold. Yeah. Yeah. So, with that, y'all, let's take a quick break, but we are going to be right back on the other side of this because you you can't be left. It would be irresponsible of me to have this conversation, dump all that very personal stuff on you and or awaken maybe some things going on in you right now as a result of hearing Jossie and I speak and share our experiences and not support you in it and talk about so much of the beauty and solutions coming out of it that I know she and I can both attest to. And so I just want to flesh this out a little more deeply and talk about just the beauty and the thriving that you referenced. It's not just survive, it's thrive. Jasia, I mean, that literally could be, and maybe it is, I think it is your
It did,
tagline.
and
If it
yes,
isn't,
a
it should be.
thriver.
It should be your tagline for your work. Yeah, okay. So let's take a quick break and y'all will see you in just a minute on the other side. I'll be right back. And we are back. And the first thing I started thinking about, Jasia, as we were on break, is this idea that when I came to you, maybe even a little before I met you, I really believed I had experienced no trauma, that my life was pretty golden. And I'm so careful about that because I have a loving family. I have great parents. It's such a delicate thing, right? When you say, oh, well, I didn't have trauma. Life was good. Everyone did the best they can. Yes. And life on planet Earth. I don't know if there's a person on planet Earth that doesn't experience some form of small drip trauma or big boom trauma, however you choose to term it, but it's just a fact of life. And it manifests itself not in the ways I think we all picture in, mental health or drinking and drugging, although those all come in. Those can come in, but sometimes it manifests itself in like a perfect looking life. Do you know what I'm saying? Will you just unpack that a little bit? Because I know we've talked about that before, and that really blew my mind wide open to go, let's all look at this in a new fashion, not as
Exactly.
some badge of victimhood that we're trying to wear as though it is somehow now an excuse to use for our situation or because we want to blame someone. That is not what I am talking about. But you say it in such an articulate way.
Yeah,
I
I
want
think that
you
was
to say
probably
that
why I was a
too.
little
Will you
nervous to
talk about
like
that?
talk about my story right at the beginning. I didn't want to lose people because I thought I was just coming in to like complain, because that's really not it. That there are so many people who they are like living pretty golden lives. They succeeded at their careers. They're in the happy relationships. They've got their kids. They're living in good homes. They're working. They're adulting pretty well. Like things are looking pretty good for them on the outside. They're taking nice
Yeah.
trips. Like it may look like they have it all, but often I've met so many of those people who actually look grab me aside. They're like, "But I don't feel free, or I just feel like some part of my soul's missing, or I don't feel like I'm
Ooh.
living out my full creative potential." Those are signs that I don't want to say they're in trauma, but that they're but that they are signs that they have created their life to please an outer energy, which is often based on a coping strategy that we make as children to please the people around us. And they succeed at that. But certain parts of their own being,
Mm.
first of all, their understanding of what
Yeah.
wasn't okay and their traumas, their essence get pushed down. And that is, I don't want to keep using the word traumatic, but that is something that impacts their ability to live their fullest radiance, their fullest vibrancy, their fullest joy, their juiciness of their lives. And so sometimes it's the people you think least need it that
I
actually need this kind of work.
That's right, because that is exactly, I mean, you just described me in so many ways. I, especially in the last few years, I have this such a desire to live fully expressed, to really know myself, to really delve in, to ask questions, to call into inquiry what it is I thought I knew, believed, was choosing for my life. I that became very clear to me in the last couple of years, and it's a beautiful thing, but it's not always easy to unpack that, especially when certain aspects are good.
Yeah,
It's like, well, then you don't wanna upset the apple cart, you know? And so that's something I really am appreciative about the way you look at this is go, this is about anyone who goes, I know there is something here and I'm meant to live more fully or more expressed or to feel a greater sense of peace or connection to myself or connection to the universe, to God, to all that I live and move and have my being in, to others, to be in relationship. And so you're so right. And we need to make sure that this isn't just for people who've struggled and been in horrific pain and have a very difficult story to tell. Like that would be such a loss
exactly.
if it was like,
Exactly.
"Oh, well, I don't
Yeah,
need that."
it's a way of
Yeah.
caring for ourselves and nourishing ourselves that is so potent that it allows for us to access our creativity and our wisdom
Mhm.
from our depths, not just from our head. You know, we've learned to look at outer society. We've been trained to look outside ourselves for our wisdom and our intuition, but it lives inside our bodies. And when we start listening to our bodies, I mean, we not only physically injure
For
ourselves
sure.
less, but we injure ourselves less in relationships and choices to money and to shopping and to business and to all those things.
Uh, ah, that's what it's so in alignment with what I learned from one of my mentors, Casey Baker, who started the Women Speak curriculum that I am licensed in and lead in and coach with. And one of the things we talk about all the time is the idea that a woman's deepest wisdom and clarity lives inside her body. We think it's up in our head, and it is so very much embodied. And that when I can help a woman drop out of that chatter in her head and drop into her body, she can access her truest voice and her greatest clarity and wisdom. and it is inside her, but we look up in our brain and think it's in our
Yeah.
knowledge base, or we just go seek more knowledge, or we look externally, to your point
Right. Or
earlier,
we even
and try
think
and
like
find
if
it
we're
outside of
taking
ourselves.
care of our bodies means we're going to the gym, we're doing our weights, we're doing our yoga, what we're doing our reps, that's enough, that's like living in the body. But that's not necessarily living in the body. You can be in incredible
Ooh.
shape, even a bodybuilder, and actually not be connected, not have a connection between the body, mind, soul, emotion piece.
Okay, will you that's something I'm trying to get. I'm now getting that I have a body, mind, and soul, but the connection piece, will you just describe that and how that
Yeah.
feels in you and what that looks like? Because I think that's probably new to a lot of people, that they're connected and interwoven, but I think many of us compartmentalize them or favor one and ignore the other two, like I was. I would favor my mind, ignore body
100%.
and
And my
soul.
first thing when
Do
people
do you
ask me
get
this
what I'm
kind of
asking?
question, what's interesting is I always go, well, I feel it right now. Like as I'm sitting here talking to you, I feel a buzz on the back of my toes. I feel tingling in my thighs. I can feel my yoni. I feel my stomach from the inside out. I can feel the buzz in my jaw. I can feel my fingers touching. I feel my butt on the chair. And it is informing what I'm saying. I'm in the center of my being. I'm not speaking from my mind. I'm speaking from the whole entirety of me. And that's when I became a public speaker. I couldn't speak publicly because I was disconnected. So my mind and body were not connected. And now they are. They were fragmented.
Wow. Oh, oh my gosh, that's so beautiful. It's so beautiful. Okay, will you talk more about how movement is the solution, especially as it relates? I mean, you can speak to your own program, and I would want you to, because I
So
know
it's
how much it's
dance.
benefiting me. So,
Yeah.
yeah, please.
Mm-mm.
But just also, yeah, because it's not just
Right.
dance. I know when I first met you, I thought it was just dance, and it's not, you guys. And that's pretty amazing and interesting as well. I mean, don't get me wrong, I love to dance, and dance is fun and it's a big release, but I got into that habit. Remember in our first week, Jacia, I was like, I just thought, oh, if I just turn on music and dance around, this is good. And you were like, oh no, honey, it's so much more. It's so much more. Like me yelling in the car last week. It's a whole body. So
Sure. Let me think
will you
about where
talk
to
more about
start.
that too, please?
So it's more than just dancing or being good at movement or wiggling in the ways we know how, which can be fun and joyous and great, or for some of us, very awkward. But it's about learning to inhabit our bodies, which means not only moving them fast and slow, but feeling their movements, feeling where the emotions come from in the body, following those patterns. Um, learning grounding tools, learning tools with our breath, learning how our mind works with our bodies, how our thoughts affect our bodies, and how when we dance certain thoughts
Mm.
into our bodies, things change, and how when we listen to our movement rather than our mind, things change. It's it's a real wholeness experience where we become in unity with all of the source in us together as like one unit. And any parts that aren't, like sometimes a certain part of the body is really loud because it needs expression. And it might need to bang out rage, or it might need to crawl up and cry, or it might need to just stretch, or it might need to just like pet your head and stroke and self-soothe and massage. So it's a number of things that really, and I do believe the program, it works on its own, but it's even better when you have there's lessons in the program, and I have teachings and themes and all that, but there's also the experience of meeting with me. If you do the VIP, you get to meet with me weekly. If you're just doing the regular one, there's a group coaching meeting, but where you actually get to process this with someone who's really there for you, and yet you're not doing it with them in front of you. So you're
Yeah.
learning how to do that on your own. Those places that are embarrassing, that maybe you're not quite comfortable yet being seen, you're practicing. But then as you get to feel safer, maybe you do have a session and you go even deeper being held. But it's that back and forth where you get to re-own yourself. So many of us lose our power in the face of other people. And so it's this combo where you get the combination of the mentor and the coach. You can
Yeah.
choose, but so I guess I'm trying to say the coaching and counseling are a part of it, but the most important thing is the practice itself,
Yeah.
learning. Once you get that, it's yours.
Yeah. No, it's yeah, yours. This is what I like about the way you do this, and I try to model the same, is you create a program that's, it's not just um the person doing this on their own, although that's important because you're developing tools that will be with you long after you and I are not here having a conversation. But you also do the intensive individual coaching, and it's like one-on-one therapy. It's exactly what it is. And then you also use the group component, which you know me, you guys, you hear me talk about all this all the time. When you have a group, a sisterhood, let's say, or just a community, it may not be all women, a community, there is something so powerful and cathartic about both being held in community, witnessed and seen in community, and processing something in a really safe psychological space and that's supportive. So big. And I love that you don't neglect that either, Jacia, because I can honestly say some of the best growth I have had in the last couple of years was
For sure.
100% because I was in community with the right people who were so focused on being growth minded, and they weren't like-minded. I talk about that on this podcast a lot too. I don't necessarily want to stay with like-minded people anymore. That was what my problem was. I was in the echo chamber with everyone who thought like me. Like-hearted? Now that's different because we share a love through line and an integral core value through line by being like-hearted, but
Yeah.
that's different than like-minded,
Yeah.
and I loved
And
it,
I just
you
think
know?
it was so fun to meet all you guys who are Jen fans. Like I adored her. The moment we met in this media production experience we were having together, I just knew we were connected. So it's been really amazing to watch on the other side how deep our connection has gotten to go. And I just know you're phenomenal at what you do, and I'm so stoked that you chose to do this program alongside me and experience my work.
Oh, well, totally. And I am glad too, because y'all, for those of you who are in my orbit, in my community, maybe you're in one of my women speak circles or you're a client, uh, and my expanding community, which more is coming on that. Jasia is going to be one of my guest experts, without question, who is going to teach and offer more on this. So you are going to see more of Jasia if you're my community. But in the meantime, you need to know her. She is so loving and communal, and is someone you just want on speed dial. Josia's like, okay. I'm not giving out your number, Josia. That would be
Mhm.
weird.
So sweet.
But honestly, all of her details are in the show notes, y'all, whether it's her website, whether it's
Got
subscribing
a
to her email, get
got
on
a
the
free
phone with
stress
her and
buster. Got some
check out
free
all of
freebies
her
for you
stuff,
too.
her book. Oh my gosh, yes. Oh my gosh, you do that. I know, I love that. So yeah, free resources, like get rolling to just know this person and have her in your world as she is in mine, and know that we are all going to be
Yes,
continuing
we are.
together in some really powerful ways. This woman, she's also a magnificent speaker, and y'all know that's my jam. I'm all about elevating, amplifying amazing voices and speakers. And so there's just so much good stuff ahead. But Jasia, just on a personal level, I thank you for being a tremendous, trusted, dear friend. There's things I've shared with you that some of my closest people don't know, and you hold it with such grace and love and never judgment. I've told you some savory shit, girl, and you just are unfazed. You're like, okay. You hold it with such strength and compassion and love. You ask me some of the best questions. You help me think through things, or I should say, feel into things, because I think too much. Sometimes I need to feel into some things instead and weigh things a little more carefully that way, as opposed to trying to think and rationalize, because I'm darn good at that already. So I
Oh,
just personally thank you and love you
I
for
love you
being
too.
who
Thank you
you
so
are. Thank you for
much.
being my dear friend. Yeah.
You're the
Mm. All right, you all. We're heading off. Connect to Jacia. She's wonderful. And in the meantime, I adore you all. And I'm just so thankful we're in community together. Thank you for being part of Real Conversations in your world and joining this one with us. You're awesome. Love y'all. See you next time.